Naya, you're not here, but if you were here, what would you say?
What would I say? I would say everything that Salpi said times 10. We are, you know, I've been following since 5 a.m. I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, so I've been following everything that's been happening with the Social Good Summit in Yerevan, starting with the hangout with our Bangladesh team, with all the stuff that's coming out of our Honduras and Tajikistan team, and most importantly, all of the results that came out of the Armenia Social Good Summit last year that has set the standard, at least for the Counterpart portion of the summit, but also all of the great ideas that are being talked about at the summit in New York and that we're feeding off of. But the fact that you and I, and you know, I have the privilege of talking to all of the participants at the summit in Yerevan is exactly to the point of what you're saying. This is not about technology being a toy in our hands that we want to learn to be cool with and happy with. This is an essential existential issue at this point. If we know how to use the technology that is so readily available to us, then we've taken a leap towards solving some of the most significant issues in our lives, in our communities. And we've seen that happen in Armenia.
Alex, last year we were talking about how in Armenia we had just begun to use technology for social issues, social groups. We are at a point, unusually enough, that we're taking it for granted. Does that mean that we're not therefore being bold enough, hamartsag enough to embark in new directions? It's almost become like the telephone. This is what you do.
Right. Salpi, let me, you know, excellent question. And let me both say yes and no. And the yes part is sometimes the bells and whistles of technology and the fact that we're able to do things that we may not be able to do in our physical lives, that we get to do in our virtual lives, makes it feel like TV, like telephone. It's entertainment. But I want to point to a few examples of how the tools that we talked about last year, for instance, have become extremely important ways that young Armenians, not in Yerevan, are advancing the needs of their communities and the solutions in their communities. So I'll use a few examples. You know, we work with a network of 40+ youth groups across Armenia. And one of those groups, Verin Patagni, the YCAC, the Youth and Community Action Center in Verin Patagni, just last year after the summit, launched their own online radio. In an environment where access to media is not ideal, and certainly where talking about ideas and you know, third options, third alternatives to what we have in our lives is something that's essential. Verin Patagni, young people, young leaders from Verin Patagni have figured out how to do it and are doing it not only for their own community but for the whole world to listen to. So any Armenian from anywhere can get on the Verin Patagni online radio and talk and listen to what the young people of that community are talking about. Right? So we have several other YCACs, community centers, youth and action centers, that have launched their own YouTube channels, another form of communicating with the broader world, but also, Salpi, and this is the important piece, not just having you know, what we all crave, a way of broadcasting ourselves on the internet, but teaching and learning through that. When you look at some of the videos that are uploaded, some of the things that are talked about on the YouTube videos and channels of, for instance, Nor Kharbert, Aygebat, Akhurian, and Lijashen community centers, they are actually teaching each other, they're learning from one another how to organize their communities, how to solve the trash issue in their communities, how to address traffic in some of these communities.
We don't have those problems. I don't understand why.
Right? Exactly. So this is what this technology is doing. And you know, for most of us who live in larger cities, particularly when we're in Yerevan, we forget that there's a whole other world out there that may not have the same luxuries. But we're finding that these communities and these young people in the communities that I mentioned are actually finding ways to do exactly what they need to be doing. Other ways, you know, less technologically, less bells and whistly ways that our communities in Dissev, in Areni, Vartenik, in these communities, we've had young people start up their Facebook pages, and I have to tell you, our team actually started up the youth community and action center's Facebook page. And on a daily basis, I go on that page and I learn something new. But more importantly, I see how they're learning from each other. You know, we had posted some months ago, we had posted an action item from somewhere in Ejmiadzin about a fundraising event for the community. And all of a sudden, we saw the same idea pop up across a lot of other communities where young people were leading, you know, $100 fundraising drive to do whatever they needed to do in that community. So it is becoming a major player. The technology is becoming a major player, but the technology is becoming a major player because these young people are saying, we're going to make it a major player, major element of how we think of our communities.
Two quick questions before Skype goes bad. One is, how many countries, cities are doing what we're doing right now? And number two, what have you heard from them?
I'm sorry to say that I don't know exactly the number of countries that are participating. I believe it's somewhere in the 79 or 80 numbers of countries that are participating virtually in the summit, but I may have to correct that. I'm not quite sure. But what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and let me use the 4 countries that are in the Counterpart network that are participating in the summit this year. What we're learning is, just this morning when Bangladesh and Armenia were having their hangout, we learned about how intercommunities, community organizations in Armenia are opening up a whole bunch of new opportunities for citizens from communities that may not physically have access to each other to use services, to offer services, to address infrastructure issues from one another. So this idea, this mechanism that works in Armenia, and it's very specific to Armenia, given its size, given its history and structure, all of a sudden caught on in terms of an idea in Bangladesh. All of a sudden our Bangladesh team said, wait a minute, we may actually be able to pull this inter-community organization idea and institute it here in Bangladesh. A larger country, huge numbers of people, but certainly an idea that's worth trying out. One of the other things that we're seeing come about from the conversations among the 4 countries is this idea of, okay, so this year we're doing a 4-country connection for the Social Good Summit. What if we actually thought, okay, all of us do youth leadership camps in our programs in our country. What if we actually launched a global virtual youth leadership camp where Armenian youth leaders, Bangladesh youth leaders, and Honduras and Tajikistan and United States could actually come together for a week-long, 2-week-long youth camp and begin learning from each other through all of this technology, using all of this technology without having to ever cross a border. So essentially breaking down borders and having a youth movement across borders.
You know, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, oh my God, Bangladesh and Armenia, we can solve problems the same way. But then I realized I'm saying something very silly because, heck, if we can use IT for the same phones and the same computers, why can't we use the same technologies to do social good?
Absolutely, and Selpi, I'll tell you something else, and this is my hope for the outcomes of this year's summit, and certainly the discussion that's taking place in Armenia, is that we haven't even begun to tap into a fraction of the benefits and abilities that all of this technology is allowing us to use. You know, we tend to focus on the things that are readily available, you know, the social networking sites and the computer programs and so on. There's so much more simpler things that we can do. You know, the mechanism of, or the tool of SMSing for financial transactions, for information awareness raising transactions. Phone calls, using phone technology, voice technology for much of what the Social Good Summit is talking about is also not fully tapped into in a lot of the places that we work in. So it's absolutely there. And it's not a silly thing you're saying. What it is, it's reminding all of us that we haven't begun to really realize what it is that we could accomplish sitting in our own homes, sitting in our communities, but always having the intention. And this is the important thing. All of this technology would not be useful if the youth leaders, if the communities that are participating in this did not have the intention of connecting and saying, you know what, my human rights issue, my civil society issue, my community development issue is mine, but it is no different than what is happening in India and in Bangladesh and in Honduras. It is, or in the United States. It is exactly the same thing, and the solutions are similar. All it takes is a conversation to begin.
Լավ, վերջին պատկամդ, որ կորձի անցնենք ստեղ, ինչ ունես ասելիք։
Keep the conversation going, խոսենք, միասին եթե կարողանանք շարունակենք երկխոսությունը, կհասնենք այն ամեն ինչին, որ ուզում ենք հասնենք։ Բայց կարևորը սա է, որ այսօր շատ ուրախ ենք, շատ զվարճալի է, որ պիտի շարունակենք երկխոսությունը, այսինքն մի օրվա խնդիր չի սա։ Նպատակը իրար հետ միանալու, իրար հետ կապ ստեղծելու, պիտի շարունակվի։
Շնորհակալություն։
Շատ շնորհակալ եմ, կարոտել եմ ձեզ։